That the Brotherhood Without Banners was created, indirectly, by Ned Stark is but one of many details about the group that's easy to overlook. Catelyn leads the group now, under a different name, of course, but she as well played an indirect role in creating it. Her seizure of Tyrion was met with Tywin's unleashing of atrocities across the Riverlands. His goal in that was to lure Ned Stark out from the Red Keep, because Ned Stark leads from the front. It was a predictable thing to happen. And then he would capture Ned and swap him for Tyrion, and that would be the end of it. But thanks to Jaime, who ended up helping break Ned's leg, that plan failed. And instead, we got the Brotherhood Without Banners. And they have been a significant part of the story ever since. A unique part as well. They are mostly a group of commoners, peasants, and what Westeros would call the lowborn. Most of A Song of Ice and Fire is focused on the nobility, which makes sense, but the story would be incomplete without the regular folk. How they deal with war and deprivation and suffering and whatever else is yet to come. What they hope for, how they see the greater conflict through different eyes. They have a different set of what's important to them. War impacts all levels of society. Now, while Tywin and Robb and Renly and Stannis and Balon and everybody else are fighting over castles and titles, the commoners are fighting for their lives. And the Brotherhood is one of the only organizations, the chief organization, helping them out. Who took on the Bloody Mummers directly? The worst thing going in the Riverlands. It wasn't Robb's armies. It wasn't Tywin's armies, even though the Bloody Mummers switched sides. It was the Brotherhood, right? They took them on directly. It was their army that did that. Well, if you could call it an army, and it was mostly commoners. Yet there's so much about them that is anything but common. There's a bizarre and compelling blending of magics and culture here. R'hllor, the undead, prophecies, the old gods, and the seven are all present, plus a mixture of personalities and characters and backgrounds. Nothing common about that. Even though none of them are POVs, we get various POVs spending time with them. Arya and Brienne in particular, with Jaime in the queue, to be sure, given how his arc is hanging right now. Plus other important characters like Sandor Clegane, Gendry, Edric Dane, etc. Living like outlaws can change a person, though, right? These were good guys, but George doesn't pull punches with the realities of an insurgent force, of living the life of a resistance fighter. He does, however, add the unrealities of all those supernatural elements, especially in the group's leadership. It's fair to mention as well that this group and their various plot lines were handled poorly by the show. Even though some of the individual characters were pretty solid and the performances were great, still, the difference is pretty large. This episode is thus something of a palate cleanser as we refresh ourselves on the better version, which will help make the two canons more distinct. The Knights of the Hollow Hill, the Forgotten Fellowship, the Brotherhood Without Banners. All that, well, all them, and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome back, everyone. If you are catching us live, it must be around 3 o'clock Eastern on Sunday, because that's when we're live. Otherwise, you can catch us after the fact on YouTube or on Spotify. The video version is edited on Spotify, so it's a little clearer and cleaner. Sound quality is a little better. A couple of mistakes get cut out, but you can catch it anywhere. Also very well edited on any podcast platform. And if you listen on Patreon as a member, well, you get it ad-free. That's right, patreon.com, History of Westeros. Big shout out to our good friend Nina Krusling, good Queen Allie with 1L on Tumblr. She was very big in reminding me to check out the writings of the late, great Stephen Atwell, and he has a lot to say about the Brotherhood Without Banners. His chapter by chapter read through of A Song of Ice and Fire was in progress when he passed, but he got through A Storm of Swords, at least through the Brotherhood Without Banners portion. And that was really vital for us today. A lot of takes that I borrowed from Stephen or was inspired from him. So let's remember Steven and check out Race for the Iron Throne, blogspot or wordpress.com. I got the full link in the, we'll put that in the description for you. I can't remember it off the top of my head. But anyway, his work stands still many years later and will continue to, even though he's not able to add to it anymore, obviously. So check it out, Race for the Iron Throne. If you have questions for us, hit us up at westroshistory@gmail.com or on any of our socials. We're pretty much present on all the social media platforms. You can also just drop a question here live if you are live. And of course, I'll mention some episodes at the end that relate to this one. So if you want to stay immersed, we've got that covered for you. We will start with a trivia question, the answer to which is also at the end of this episode. I'm doing it a little different today. Slightly a multiple choice, reverse multiple choice type question. A imposter question. Which of these is not a member of the book version of the Brotherhood Without Banners? Melly, likely Luke, John O'Nutton.
He'd be nuttin'.
He'd be nuttin'. Pello, Trebla, Swampy Meg, Puddingfoot. She is. She be swampy. These names are crazy, right? Yeah. Puddingfoot? Like, what the heck does that mean? Merritt O'Moontown?
Puddingfoot sounds like an offshoot of Powderfoot, which is a terrible illness in the show Black Monday with Don Cheadle, where he had progressed to Powderfoot. So I think Puddingfoot is a part of that.
When you have a Puddingfoot or a Powderfoot, you go to live in Moontown. Yeah. So yeah, one of those is not in the book version of the Brotherhood Without Banners. Identify that character, and you will have gotten this one right. Let me read to you the sections that we have for you today. We have First Mention, we have King's Men, we have Under the Lightning Lord, we have the Mummer's Ford, Raiding the Lions, the Outlaw Network, Battle at the Burning Septuary, the Hollow Hill, Highheart, Under Stoneheart, Riverrun, Hildy and Other Spies, the BWB fan group, our quote of the week, departures and current members, looking ahead, and theories. That's how we'll finish with some ideas about what's to come and what we might be able to expect in the future from this group. Let's do it. That's our setup, and I'm ready to get right into it. We happen to be live streaming this episode on May 4th, so may the 4th be with you. I've even got a mashup Game of Thrones Star Wars shirt, which is a funny thing to be doing when I just said this is not a show episode, and here I am wearing a show shirt. But hey, it's the only mashup Star Wars Game of Thrones shirt I have, so, you know, I got to do that. And it's neat, too, because the Brotherhood has a lot in common with many elements of the rebellion, including the leaders and most valuable members often having serious character flaws or losing sight of their purpose, losing themselves. That's especially true of Beric Dondarrion. Not the losing sight of his purpose, which he remained quite focused on, but the losing himself. Right, that's the part, yeah, he's a little more to it in here, given the supernatural elements. And that's another thing I want to point out. One of the many things that makes the show Andor, which is on the air right now, stand out from other Star Wars shows, one of many things that makes it stand out, is the lack of supernatural stuff. It has, the Force is not present, lightsabers aren't there, you know, it's just not there. It's just not that kind of story. That is not the case with the Brotherhood Without Banners, who are steeped in various magics and supernatural plot lines, which makes them all the more interesting. And let's get to it. First Mention. Here we go with a quote from Thoros and Tom.
"We are brothers here," Thoros of Myr declared. "Holy brothers, sworn to the realm, to our God, and to each other."
The Brotherhood Without Banners.
Tom Seven Strings plucked a string.
The Knights of the Hollow Hill.
I told Aziz I wanted him to sing it for me, but he didn't.
I was slightly singing.
He's kind of like...
I'll work my way into it, maybe.
Yeah, what was that? Was that kind of like Bob Dylan-ish? I don't know.
The Brotherhood Without Banners. Knights of the Hollow Hill. No, that was more country, wasn't it? It's an unofficial name, like Cold Hands or the Three-Eyed Crow. It's not like they don't have banners at all. It's not like they carry anything that says that name on it or indicates that. It's just a nickname because they have no official name. We got to call them something. This line from Tom is actually one of only 2 times the phrase Brotherhood Without Banners appears in the main text. That's the only time it's spoken. Period. No one says Brotherhood Without Banners except that time right there. That was it. The other quote, when it appears, is narrated. It's Arya, it comes into her mind as things are happening. And we have that quote for you later in the episode. There's 2 other times it's mentioned, but they're both in the appendices. It's or 3 other times, rather. Well, you'll see what I mean. It's not quite clear like that. The name Brotherhood Without Banners applied to this group appears in the appendix in A Storm of Swords, but not in A Feast for Crows or A Dance with Dragons. They're just called Outlaws and other characters. It doesn't even give them the group name. But the real-life fan group for A Song of Ice and Fire, the Brotherhood Without Banners, which Ashea and I are inducted members of. We have a section on that later in the episode as well. They are mentioned in A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons in the appendices. So George mentioned that Brotherhood Without Banners, but didn't call this group of bandits that. So that's kind of fun. They also call themselves, as I said in the intro, the Knights of the Hollow Hill, the Forgotten Fellowship. Yeah, they don't have a single name. They just have ideas about who they are. And a man like Tom, who's a singer, he comes up with these colorful phrases, and some of them stick because, well, they're colorful phrases and they're memorable. So it kind of describes what they are, or maybe not what they are anymore, but what they were at one point. Because this first mention, it doesn't describe the origin of the group. They are outlaws now and have been for most of the span we've known them, but at the start, they were king's men given a lawful order by hand of the king Ned Stark. It may have been an unwise order. Nevertheless, it seems straightforward enough as far as that goes. Let's talk about that. The mission came all the way back into Game of Thrones, very early on. Quote,
Lord Beric Dondarrion, you shall have the command, as befits your rank. The young lord with the red gold hair bowed.
As you command, Lord Eddard.
Ned raised his voice so it carried to the far end of the throne room. In the name of Robert of the House Baratheon, the first of his name, King of the Andals and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, by the word of Eddard of the House Stark, his hand, I charge you to ride to the Westlands with all haste, to cross the Red Fork of the Trident under the king's flag, and there bring the king's justice to the false knight Gregor Clegane, and to all those who shared in his crimes. I denounce him, and attaint him, and strip him of all rank and titles, of all lands and incomes and holdings, and do sentence him to death. May the gods take pity on his soul.
Now, you all are experienced with this series, but at the time, it looked very straightforward. Good guys going to hunt bad guys. Gregor, we'd already seen his behavior at the tournament. We saw these charges laid against him, and it looked straightforward, right? I mean, and it even more looks like good guys versus bad guys because Tywin and Gregor were cast as evil right away, and Ned was cast as good. So you think, well, Ned is doing a thing, it must be a good thing. And it was. The problem wasn't that it wasn't good, it was that he didn't handle the politics of it very well. You also don't know that George R. R. Martin is necessarily such a trickster when it comes to tropes. And when you're reading the story for the first time, you might not have seen coming all the tricks and inversions that did end up coming to pass. You might have guessed that Sir Gregor would kill Lord Beric. You might have predicted that or predicted the other, but you wouldn't have guessed Gregor would kill Beric twice. That part is not very predictable. Neither would many have guessed both the man sent to lead the mission and the target would wind up undead. Yeah, Beric and Gregor are both the walking dead. Well, Beric isn't walking anymore, but he was for a while and Gregor still is, so those are entirely unpredictable from the point of which we're entering these subplots, right? That's wild. Now, Ned was very loud about this and demonstrative because he wanted everyone to know what was being done. He wanted it all to be above board. But this backfired horribly for multiple reasons. He didn't send Loras Tyrell in the group, which Varys chided him on. He's like, look, if you're going to go after the Lannisters, put the Tyrells on your side. Like, position them to be on your side. And he's like, nah, I don't want to mix all that together, and Loras is too eager, I don't want that. And of course, they were ambushed. So eagerness might have been a problem, but they were ambushed anyway. It wouldn't have made things worse. And of course, he also didn't send Ilan Payne, who was the King's Justice. And he's like, well, Ilan Payne's a Lannister, so I don't know if I could trust him. But these are things that if he had done them, it would have made the Brotherhood's job a lot easier, and it might have left them in a better position. Would Gregor and Tywin have done what they did if Loras Tyrell was in that army? Would they have wanted to upset the Tyrells? I think a lot of things were going to go on differently. Now, Ned couldn't necessarily have seen that coming, but one thing he probably should have seen coming was announcing his intentions and then sending these men out to go after Gregor. Gregor knows they're coming. Tywin knows they're coming. So an ambush should have been predictable, and that's exactly what happened. So what we'll have, if we look ahead a little bit too, and just to think about how crazy this all has become, we have a Brotherhood led by now an undead woman following being led by an undead man. And they may yet put down the undead false knight. Gregor's still out there. He might still get put down partly by the Brotherhood, or maybe it'll be Sandor, and they're associated with Sandor already. So there's like a three-way connection here, you know, like obviously Sandor is very connected to his brother in terms of their stories and their arcs, and Sandor's already have a deep connection to the Brotherhood, and they already have a deep connection to Gregor on their own because he was their original target. Now, as well, his story is tied to Arya, both Sandor and Stoneheart and the Brotherhood. So there's another person, another bit of connective tissue between all these little subplots. And of course, they were the last people to see her before she escaped for Essos. So they know Catelyn, by becoming their leader, learned that her daughter was still alive. And we barely know anything about that other than we know she's searching for her. So the greater detail and lore for these parts of the story are later in the episode. This is sort of an overview of some aspects of it. But let's tell the story from the start, backing up to this order by Ned and where it led to in the immediate aftermath. This section is called King's Men. Here's the group as it was first created. Quote,
Ned eased himself slowly back onto the hard iron seat of Aegon's misshapen throne. His eyes searched the faces along the wall. Lord Beric, he called out. Thoros of Myr, Ser Gladden, Lord Lothar. The men named stepped forward, one by one. Each of you is to assemble 20 men to bring my word to Gregor's keep. 20 of my own guards shall go with you.
Ultimately, the perfect example of the common folk caught up in the Game of Thrones. They don't care who sits the throne. They do care about being pillaged and worse, though, right? And this is where that started. This is where Beric, who is a good man, is confronted with that reality, something as a lot of highborn people never even really experience or know or take the time to learn about. So Lord Beric didn't just carry out the order, or try to carry out the order. He carried out the spirit of the order. The point was to bring justice, to bring specifically justice to Gregor Clegane, and to help the justice was for the small folk that he terrorized. Taking it back a bit farther, right, it was the order came from Tywin, but still they didn't know that at the time. They just see this false knight doing false knight things and reacted to it. Nina adds, we should give Ned some credit for this decision because his choice nearly outfoxed Tywin. He was, again, trying to lure Ned in to capture him, but Ned actually included Tywin in his declaration by saying, in the quote we read, not just Gregor, but all who shared in his crimes. He said Gregor and all who shared in his crimes. He doesn't name Tywin, but he's leaving the door open because he expects that Tywin probably did give that order, but he doesn't have proof of that yet. So Tywin would have, had things gone differently, Tywin would have had to disavow Gregor's actions in order to perhaps avoid civil war. So they all had their own plans there, and they both kind of missed some of the nuances of what the other was thinking. But let's get to the Brotherhood. Under the Lightning Lord. They've only had the two leaders so far, and only one of them was actually among the living for very long in that role. In fact, Beric was not alive when they were the Brotherhood Without Banners. They became the Brotherhood Without Banners after this battle at the Mummers Ford that he died his first death during. So let's hear from them on how it began. From the Lightning Lord himself, speaking to Sandor Clegane. Quote,
When we left King's Landing, we were men of Winterfell, and men of Derry, and men of Blackhaven, Mallory men and wild men. We were knights and squires and men-at-arms, lords and commoners, bound together only by our purpose. The voice came from the man seated amongst the weirwood roots halfway up the wall. 60 of us set out to bring the king's justice to your brother. The speaker was descending the tangle of steps toward the floor.
Now, there's an important follow to that quote that we'll have later, but let's fill in what happens here with more detail as it happened at the time, because he, of course, is telling us what happened afterwards. This is what happened in the moment at the Mummers Ford. Now, the first account we get is from Robb, who tells Catelyn about it, but it's almost humorous because Robb doesn't actually know all the names properly. He calls Beric Derek, for example. So let's skip that quote. But we get a quote from someone who was actually there. So their information is far more accurate. Robb's was secondhand with the wrong name and everything. Harwin, the son of the Master of Horse of Winterfell, relays the story right here. Quote.
Gregor was waiting for us at the Mummers Ford with men concealed on both banks. As we crossed, he fell upon us from front and rear. I saw the mountain slay Raymond Derry with a single blow, so terrible that it took Derry's arm off at the elbow and killed the horse beneath him too. Gladden Wild died there with him, and Lord Mallory was ridden down and drowned. We had lions on every side, and I thought I was doomed with the rest, but Alan shouted commands and restored order to our ranks. And those still a horse rallied around Thoros and cut our way free. 60 we'd been that morning. By dark, no more than 20 were left, and Lord Beric was gravely wounded. Thoros drew a foot of lance from his chest that night and poured boiling wine into the hole it left.
An extra piece of detail not included in the quote is that Tywin's army was not that far behind. So Gregor's van was setting this ambush, and Tywin's army was supposed to come up right behind them. Of course, that was dependent on Ned Stark being with the group, and he wasn't. So Tywin's plans may have changed in the moment there. So really, what a horrible thing. They take 60 men, and they were basically headed towards Tywin's entire host. It's like, whoops. Had they not been ambushed, they would have blundered into something perhaps worse. So they had little hope, as Harwin is telling Arya here. And in this desperate hour, a miracle occurred. If I'm exaggerating, it's not by much. The men involved would certainly see it as such. Yeah, this is a world where supernatural things happen, but none of them had ever seen someone raised from the dead. Beric was raised from the dead in the battle. Like, that's crazy. Or not in the battle. Shortly after, he rose, that night. So it's bizarre. Like, you witness that, and that's crazy. You're not going to, even in a world where there's magic, this isn't magic they've seen. They haven't been around anything like this. It's unbelievable. It's going to change you. It's like a religious experience almost. But Harwin, when he's telling Arya this, he evades the miraculous part, the supernatural. He kind of glazes over it. And that's really interesting. Here's the rest of the quote.
Every man of us was certain his lordship would be dead by daybreak. But Thoros prayed with him all night beside the fire, and when dawn came, he was still alive and stronger than he'd been. It was a fortnight before he could mount a horse, but his courage kept us strong. He told us that our war had not ended at the Mummers Ford, but only begun there, and that every man of ours who'd fallen would be avenged tenfold.
Avenged tenfold, not avenged sevenfold. This is not a shout out to that band. Yeah, so that's interesting. Like, we know from characters like Lem, who is simply in denial about Beric being raised from the dead multiple times. He's like, yep, Thoros is a great healer, and then They're like, yeah, healer, sure. So Harwin might be the case here, rather than just talking around the subject because he's speaking to Arya, who is a 10-year-old girl, and he maybe doesn't want to try to throw that at her. Like, yeah, and then he got up again, even though he should have been dead. Like, he just isn't telling her that part of the story because she won't get it. It's an important thing about A Song of Ice and Fire is, yeah, we are all aware of unreliable narratives. We also have to be aware of unreliable receivers of information because people lie to them. It happens a lot in Cersei's chapters. For example, people lie to Cersei a lot. And a lot of these POVs are children, so things get not told to them because they're children. So, yeah, a hero rising from the dead to lead them, yeah, you can see why he left that out for the 10-year-old. It's mystical and unheard of, and even amongst the Brotherhood, they probably don't exactly know how to deal with it or think about it or talk about it, as people like Lem are an example. So, of course, they were no match for an army, down to 200 men with a peculiar, miraculous leader at the front, but they were still capable of doing harm to the Lannisters. Even before we meet them on screen, other than seeing Beric in the throne room there, well before Arya encounters them, we hear about them from Tywin in Tyrion's POV, who complains. He says, Beric and Thoros have been raiding our supply lines. So Tyrion, is caught up in that briefly near the end of A Game of Thrones. This next section is called Raiding the Lions. Now, under Stoneheart, if we're looking far ahead, the Brotherhood is targeting Freys and Lannisters in particular, which, yes, there's a lot of differences between Stoneheart's leadership and Beric's, but that part's not that different, because it was a Lannister man, Sir Gregor, they were after in the first place, and Lannisters who ambushed them, and then Lannisters who were ravaging the Riverlands, who they're trying to save the commoners from. So the Lannisters have been in this the whole way, and then the Red Wedding happens, and the Freys are kind of linked to the Lannisters in that regard, so it's well, now they're targeting these two houses instead of just the one. But at the start, it wasn't about vengeance or anything personal, which it absolutely is for Stoneheart. It was about helping the king against what was clearly a rebel lord in Tywin Lannister and this false knight, Gregor Clegane. That was the job. That was the deal. Now, Harwin tells Arya how everything changed. They went out there as king's men and became outlaws without any action of their own. It just happened. Quote,
"Only then we heard that Robert was dead, and Lord Eddard as well, and Cersei Lannister's whelp had ascended the Iron Throne. That turned the whole world on its head. We'd been sent out by the king's hand to deal with outlaws, you see, but now we were the outlaws, and Lord Tywin was the hand of the king. There was some wanted to yield then, but Lord Beric wouldn't hear of it. We were still king's men, he said, and these were the king's people the lions were savaging. If we could not fight for Robert, we would fight for them, until every man of us was dead. And so we did. But as we fought, something queer happened. For every man we lost, two showed up to take his place. A few were knights or squires of gentle birth, but most were common men, field hands and fiddlers and innkeeps, servants and shoemakers, even 2 septons, men of all sorts, and women too, children, dogs."
Nina writes that Harwin's words to Arya show how much his experience has changed traditional feudal thinking for him. The Mummers Ford saw the downfall of an aristocratic leadership with Raymond Derry, Gladden Wild, and Lord Mallory all slain. And Beric was killed too, technically, but he came back. So Harwin and the Brotherhood faced a paradox. They'd been sent out by the King's Hand to bring outlaws, but by the King's Hand, and then the new King's Hand declared them outlaws. Like, what are you supposed to do? So the answer to that paradox, according to Beric, was to fulfill their original mission, the spirit of the mission, as I said earlier, not just the letter of the law. Maybe Gregor Clegane is out of their reach now, but they still were there because of what Gregor did to the small folk, and those small folk are still there, and they can still be defended. In fact, they very much need it. They're king's men, here to protect the king's people. It sounds so basic, but it's not. It's fairly radical in this world. To us, it's like, yeah, protect the people. These lives are important. Of course you protect people. Life comes before almost anything, if not anything. But Arya's a good girl. Like, she's a good person. She hangs out with commoners. She doesn't have that snobbery that's present among so many other people of her rank, yet she still sees this idea as a betrayal. She's still disappointed. She gets it, kinda, but when she saw Harwin, she was like, hey, that's my father's man. He will do what I need. He will be on my side. It doesn't occur to Arya at first that he has taken on a new master. He is now following the Brotherhood. He's no longer sworn to the Starks, and that just blows Arya's mind. It makes sense kind of to her when she hears it, but in the moment it makes her sad and disappointed, like, oh, you're not helping me. I'm being held for ransom by you, you know? But she still kind of understands because they're helping people. So it's a real conundrum for her. It throws her world off a bit because she just is used to thinking that anything her father does is correct. And for someone to not work for her father anymore, for someone to betray her father in finger quotes, it just doesn't make sense to her, even though on some level she does understand. So it's a really interesting bit of writing by George where we see these different class struggles through the eyes of someone that is still in their formative years, someone that doesn't have a lot of the natural inclinations to dislike commoners and is able to see both sides, even though she's disappointed and feels betrayed. But Harwin's ultimate message here is that this aristocratic model just doesn't matter to him anymore. It doesn't work anymore. He's seen how flawed it is and how stupid it is. It's like, I was a king's man, and then I became an outlaw, just like that. Like, that's dumb. I'm not doing this anymore. But it wasn't really that. That's part of it. But it's really just the being out there with these common folks, seeing their suffering and realizing that this is where he belongs and what he can do, and that he's one of them. Yeah, the goal of bringing lions to justice became protecting the commoners from injustices from lions. Eventually, other problems arose, and even Robb's men became as bad as the Lannisters in many cases. Not necessarily the ones in his army, because those were in the West. They were being awful to Western peasants instead of ones in the Riverlands. But the deserters, Robb had deserters, there were Lannister deserters. Every army has deserters, even the good armies. You know, especially Karstarks, though, right? The Karstark men, after the execution of Rickard Karstark, flooded the Riverlands looking for Jaime, looking for, and being awful all the way through. Killing people, raping people, just being as bad as the Bloody Mummers in a lot of cases, or as bad as Gregor, or what have you. So it's at this phase of their existence where we get a more firsthand look at them, when we see them take in Arya and Gendry and Hot Pie, and Gendry for good, and Hot Pie kind of for good. He joins one of the Brotherhood's allies rather than joining the Brotherhood directly. It was Gendry joins directly, but that comes a bit later. When they actually meet them, they have this conversation, or rather they overhear this conversation between Tom O'Sevens and Engai the Archer. It's pretty clever. There's a little undercurrent here. Let's hear it. Quote.
Could be a wolf, maybe a lion.
With 4 feet, you think? Or 2?
Makes no matter, does it?
And there you go. At one point, it did. It did matter whether it was a wolf or a lion on 2 feet, but eventually it does not, because they're all enemies. They're all dangerous. By the latter stages of the war, neither side can be trusted, because any Stark in the Riverlands is a broken man, probably a Karstark, a brigand. And any Lannisters, well, they haven't been able to trust them since the beginning. So it's very foreshadowing. Like, at this point in the war, there is that difference, but later on there isn't. And this is very playful. They're trying to, the Engai and Tom know that Arya and Hot Pie and Gendry are hiding behind this wall, and they're trying to be obvious to get a reaction and talking out loud and saying things. But so it's delivered very playfully, but it is actually got some depth to it if you think about it. Now, Lem, of course, is with them. He just doesn't talk as much. He's taciturn and grumpy, and he in particular is a microcosm of their decline. There's many ways you can look at this, but there's several of the characters that you could look at and see how they start and where they end up, and just the way they look. And it's just a clear sign of decline. Like, Thoros goes from the man he looks like to just run down and ragged. He loses weight, but people don't even recognize him anymore. Lem's the same way. His cloak is big and broad and bright. But by the time we see him through Brienne's POV, it's described as sodden and filthy. His nose has been broken by Arya. He's wearing a hound's helm. They all look different. Here, Arya thinks he's big with the, quote, look of a soldier. He doesn't have the look of a soldier anymore. He's still big, but he's wearing the hound's helm and his, being all muddy and dirty and gross. Like, that doesn't look like a soldier anymore. I mean, yeah, he looks like an outlaw. And this scene is telling because the outlaws behave not like outlaws. Singing, talking out loud, being very demonstrative and visible, that's not what outlaws do. They're supposed to be sneaky and furtive, right? This is the opposite of stealthy. And that's part of why they're doing it, because they know there's these kids here they're trying to, coddle, trying to get them to convince them to come with them, so they can take their horses, which is what happens. And they keep calling themselves King's Men, which, that is kind of their mission, right? To distinguish themselves from outlaws. And they do a little bit of, maybe it's a light gaslighting, where they start to imply that Arya and Gendry and Hot Pie, they're outlaws. Like, oh, honest folk wouldn't hide behind a wall, and it's like, they must be outlaws. In fact, no, you're the outlaws. So they're good. They're mostly good, but this moral ambiguity is present right away, right? They accuse Arya and friends of stealing from a garden. Normally, stealing from a dead man's garden in wartime when you're starving is fine, right? That's acceptable behavior. But Thomas Evans knows, or claims to know, the farmer, his family anyway, because that farmer's passed. He tells them, hey, this is Farmer Blank's land, and you don't look like him, so you're not his relatives. First of all, Tom could just be spinning a yarn. He could not know them at all. He could just say that. Arya won't know. She'll believe it. She'll be like, yeah, I don't know. If he's telling the truth, then the Brotherhood's probably been using this farm for a while, getting food off of it because they need food, and that might in fact be why they were there, to get food from this particular farm, because they know about it. But if he's lying, well, that makes sense too, because, Tom would have reason to do that. So this reflects the natural reality too of resistance groups living close to the population, as many do. They have a personal connection and knowledge of the land they're defending. They are married into it or have families with it. They act as protectors of the place that they come from. They're probably defenders of the community in peacetime as well. The types to stand up when something is threatening, like you have a community meeting, and the ones who are like the loudest and most aggressive about defending the place or making sure things are good. The ones who act as security, things like that. The people who stand up within a community when violence threatens, basically. That's the Anguy, the Tom, the Lemoncloak. That's who these guys are, probably, at least to some way, right? And that's why the people love them so much. That's why the people will do anything for them, because they're one and the same. They all come from the same group. They have the similar backgrounds. They come from the same communities. Which leads us to our next section on this, which is perhaps their best advantage, this connection to the common folk. We're calling this section the Outlaw Network. If they're going to be outlaws, they had to learn how. These aren't career outlaws. These are King's Men that had to change who they were in order to survive and to carry out their mission. So they had to learn how to be outlaws. These weren't, born and bred outlaws, right? They were like, let's learn how to do this. They started off by just understanding things from a basic military perspective. Like Beric is a lord and a knight. He was trained in warfare. He knows things like raiding and things like that. Like knightly combat does include some forms of raids and ambushes and things like that. And he would know those basics, but he doesn't necessarily know a whole lot of things about hiding in the wilderness or getting supplies when you're hunted, living off the land. Lords don't necessarily have to do that. They have supplies and wealth and money. There might be some exceptions, but I doubt Beric Dondarrion had ever lived grimy, to use a modern term, right? I doubt he ever had to live in the forest without food until he became an outlaw. But some of these commoners probably have gone through lean times. They have gone through periods without food, or a few days or longer with very little to eat. So they bring that sort of toughness and acceptance and familiarity with this lifestyle to the table, which makes them all the more dangerous. They can actually teach the lords and knights of the group how to do these things. Whereas in exchange, the lords and the knights teach them sword fighting and spear fighting and discipline and combat, the things that they learn. Their education gets shared. And it isn't like, it isn't just a one-way street where the commoners take orders and just follow those commands and nothing else. No, this is a sharing. This is more communal. The information is passing both ways. It's two-factor rather than one-directional. And because there's so few people out there like this, because there's so few people helping the commoners, no one is standing up for them except the Brotherhood, that makes them all the more beloved and makes them all the more receiving of help from the common folks. Like, yeah, I want to help the Brotherhood. I want to do that. They're helping all of us. This creates enormous amounts of loyalty because there's no one else doing it. Harwin explains it to Arya when they're looking for Lord Beric. She just doesn't get it. She doesn't understand a lot of this, and it's great as a reader because we don't get a lot of it either. And so we're Arya. Arya is being explained to getting an explanation of things that we also need explained to us, like this quote: "If you're their men, why do they hide from you?"
Tom Seven Strings rolled his eyes at that, but Harwin gave her an answer. "I wouldn't call it hiding, milady, but it's true. Lord Beric moves about a lot and seldom lets on what his plans are. That way, no one can betray him. By now there must be hundreds of us sworn to him, maybe thousands, but it wouldn't do for us all to trail along behind him. We'd eat the country bare, or get butchered in a battle by some bigger host. The way we're scattered in little bands, we can strike in a dozen places at once and be off somewhere else before they know. And when one of us is caught and put to the question, well, we can't tell them where to find Lord Beric, no matter what they do to us."
So not even a single one of them, not a one of them knows all the allies and hiding places that the group has. There isn't a single person that could draw an organizational tree that could list all of their resources, all of their allies. But it's interesting to hear those numbers. It could be thousands. We haven't seen that organized. Maybe it will at some point. Could we see maybe a big rallying of commoners at some point? I have an idea or two for y'all in the latter part of this episode. So the answer is maybe. Strong maybe. Just a few examples. Stony Sept, the Inn of the Kneeling Man, the Crossroads Inn, the Septon at Sally Dance. These are all allies they've acquired along the way. And some of these might fly by without you realizing the significance of some of these allies. First of all, getting support from nobles is a big deal by itself. But support from the faithful? Septons. That's interesting. Because these are R'hllorists. They're openly trumpeting R'hllor. They are sworn to R'hllor. Their knighthood depends on R'hllor. Their leader is resurrected by R'hllor. Thoros is a R'hllorist. So Septons joining them, that means they value the Brotherhood's actions, goals, and ideology more than they dislike this religious difference. So this is part of what I was saying earlier about the same way that commoners and lords work together in this environment where they wouldn't do so elsewhere is also the environment created here that allows for this religious syncretism to happen. Like the Seven and R'hllor worshippers, it's not really a problem, right? This is the most successful R'hllorist outreach in Westeros, period. Thoros was there to win Aerys over, didn't work. Tried to win Robert over, didn't work. Made friends with the man, but didn't get any new followers. But as soon as he goes out on this mission and resurrects Beric, R'hllorists are like, yeah, people are like, yeah, I follow R'hllor. Yeah, there's never been more success. The Brotherhood Without Banners is the single most successful example of R'hllorist outreach in Westeros. It's crazy to think about that, but it's true. Stony Sept is on this list because, well, they have allies there, but it's also important because it was where Robert hid. Robert Baratheon, their king's men. He's the king, right? And it's an extra fun thing because Robert, as a rebel, which they are now, hid in a spot which is now helping these rebels. Stony Sept helped Robert, and now it's helping Robert's loyal rebels many years later. And Robert, of course, fathered Bella during the Battle of the Bells, at the Battle of Stony Sept, or during Stony Sept battle there. And remember, there's that moment where Bella almost sleeps with Gendry, and they don't know that they're related. And yeah, whoops. So just a bunch of examples of places that the Brotherhood has allies in, and there's countless more that, I mean, George couldn't possibly list them all, just as we couldn't name all the allies, we couldn't name all their locations, etc. Yeah, it's way too big for that. A few others are Acorn Hall. That's where Lady Ravella Smallwood, who was a swan by birth, they're vassals of House Vance. The Lady of the Leaves is a commoner, but she's kind of lives in a hidden village, and this is a whole interesting, almost Tolkien-esque setup there. Lord Leicester is with them as well, indirectly. His maester is communicating with them as well. So everywhere they go, there's helpers, shelter, supplies, and spies. People that are going to give them information. They're going to be looking out for them. And of course, they even have the supernatural, right? They had Thoros from the start, but Thoros wasn't much of a red priest, right? He's just a drinker that could fight. You know, he didn't really, his R'hllorist stuff was mostly just preaching. He didn't really have powers. But now he does. Now sometimes he is reading the flames now. And of course, he's resurrected Beric a bunch of times. So as the Brotherhood has evolved and grown, and there's some evolution, some devolution there, but they've changed for sure. One thing they're much better at now is their tactics and their basic outlaw lifestyle. They're much more proficient at it than they were when they started, because as I said a minute ago, none of them started off as outlaws. They weren't experienced in this. So over the several books time, they've gained valuable experience. But this is, again, to distinguish them from any other outlaw group we've ever heard of. What other outlaw group has used, prophecy and flame reading and stuff like that to guide them, let alone having an undead leader? That's just nothing like anything else we have an example for. So the Brotherhood, by shifting their focus from going after Lannisters to helping the common folk, and thus winning the loyalty of the common folk, it became a reciprocal relationship. It's we help you, you help us, and that worked out great, or continues to work out great. It's not working out as great anymore because of the change in focus, but at the time of Beric's leadership, it was working pretty well as far as an arrangement. Sir Gregor, Sir Amory, and Vargo Hoat were out there, and they were trying to stop them, trying to anticipate them, trying to give food to people who had been displaced by them, things like that. Now, those would have been their three most wanted. Surely they would have wanted people like Tywin or Jaime, but early on in their existence, with just 40 men and maybe some new recruits coming in, the idea of capturing a Jaime or a Tywin would have been kind of unreasonable. Little did they know that they would be able to capture Jaime later, a couple books later, but this isn't what I'm saying. Like, they had to learn and get experience and figure out how to be outlaws. They wouldn't have, under Beric Dondarrion, they were willing to take the Hound's money, right? But he wouldn't have used Brienne as bait to lure Jaime. That's not Beric Dondarrion's style. Especially not after witnessing her bravery at the inn, killing Rorge and taking horrific wounds from Biter, doing what a knight is supposed to do. Stoneheart punishes her for that. Well, not for that, but for her other quote-unquote crimes that she perceives. Beric would not have done this. Beric would have been like, hey, look what she did. That's great. She's doing the right thing. Do you want to join us? Like something like that. But no, that's so that you get to see this evolution or devolution, as I say, from the way they behave and the way they treat other people. And it's a big drop off there, isn't it? So they had to think smaller when they were new at being outlaws. They weren't as skilled. They didn't have as many options. They had to keep to within their means. Over time, they just got more ruthless and brutal as they figured out what their options were. And I mean, they're a little ugly even from the start, though, right? Think about this. I think most people miss this, or missed both of these factors. I think a lot of you caught this part, which is that the inn where Arya and friends are brought to by Tom and Angai and Lem is the same inn that Jaime and Brienne and Sir Cleos pass through. The one where the owners try to direct them into an ambush, but Brienne and Jaime sniff it out. Cleos doesn't, but Brienne and Jaime both sniff it out. They're like, I think we're being set up for an ambush here. Now that seems fine, right? Like, what's wrong with them doing that? What's wrong with setting up some Lannisters to be ambushed? Well, the problem is they didn't know they were Lannisters. They didn't know that was Jaime. He had his head shaved. They don't know who Brienne is. They didn't know who Sir Cleos was. None of them they were traveling incognito. We might say, okay, those are clearly knights. Like, that dude's really big. But they didn't know who or which side. So, and it didn't matter. They don't care which side it's on. That's the point here that I'm saying is these ambushers were not really ambushing Lannisters only. They would ambush anyone. That's what we learn in the follow-up. Anyone can be ambushed. Regular folk. So this element of the Brotherhood right away is robbing regular folk to feed other regular folk. It's already a little gray, right? They take Arya's horses and they give him an IOU, right? That doesn't mean very much. Arya, of course, doesn't even have that IOU anymore. I don't even know when she lost it. So this is morally ambiguous at best. They say they're better than the Lannisters, who was like, the Lannisters would have just taken your horse and given you nothing. They might have killed you. True, but that doesn't make this good. It's less bad. Like, and that bar was so low you wouldn't trip over it. Arya had means of transportation. She's alone, nearly alone, vulnerable, but had means of transportation, and they took that from her. That's not being good guys. Yes, a lot of the other things they do are good guy stuff, but these are humans in a George R. Martin story. They're not going to be completely good or completely bad, right? It's also sad because in this moment, there's a very subtle scene where Angai's teaching Arya to wield a bow. Like, she wants to learn that, but she's not strong enough to pull it back. She's a little child. Bows are really heavy, to draw a bow. And Angai's like, look, we'll get you a bow at Riverrun, like we'll get you a small one that's made for your hand. And she's like, cool. And Tom's like, nah, we're not doing that. If we go to Riverrun with her, it's to ransom her. So it's like Angai's instinct was to treat the child like a child, to be good to her, to be friendly, to be, kind of like an older brother, just be good, be decent. But the reality of their situation as outlaws trumps that. But Angai's not thinking like an outlaw at this point. He's thinking like a good guy. He's like, no, we're outlaws because we were forced into it. We're not like outlaws. We're Kingsmen outlaws, right? So we're still good guys. And so they try to do good things, but the reality of their situation pushes them towards these morally gray areas, or bad, or just not gray, just dark, So it's like I said, it's sad. Like, you want to see these friendships and these compassion happen, but there's a barrier to just basic human decency here. On the other hand, counterexample, let's look at the Brotherhood at their absolute best. The battle at the Burning Sept. Yeah, George has a few battles with burning this and that. We had the Battle of the Burning Mill, and the Dance of the Dragons. It's a battle at the Burning Sept. A good example of the Brotherhood acting to defend the commoners here is what we have. It's when they assault the Bloody Mummers. The Mummers sacked a Sept, inflicting atrocities as is their wont. But while they were still there, enjoying the stolen food and torturing the surviving Septons and all that, stuff that they do, the Brotherhood attacked. Perhaps the most important undertone of this battle is that it is, at the time, the best and the worst of what's happening in the Riverlands. The Bloody Mummers are evil personified, causing untold, unspeakable harm. There's no redeeming qualities about them whatsoever. While the Brotherhood are a grassroots effort to defend against such. They're the Riverlands' main defense against this and other things. Now, it also should be noted, just at this point, the Bloody Mummers aren't even working for Tywin anymore. At this moment, when this battle happens, they're working for Roose. It doesn't even matter, though. It doesn't change what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they do it. Nothing at all. It's just evil. They're just attacking for personal gain and greed and to inflict harm because they enjoy it. The Brotherhood Without Banners, I almost called them the Brave Companions, which is what Sandor does intentionally to piss them off. I didn't mean it, guys. The Brave Companions are assaulted here directly, and the Brotherhood risks themselves directly in combat, taking on risk of their own lives to destroy a portion of the Bloody Mummers to prevent them from inflicting future evil. It's an unambiguously good act. Now, of course, they didn't announce they're coming with song like Tom did when they were approaching Arya. They didn't draw up battle lines. No, it was an ambush. They sneak attacked. They tried to do it in a way that would cause their own side to take the fewest casualties. They attacked at night, or rather, it read just before dawn. They shot fire arrows, which risked harming the hostages, but it was a good calculated risk. This is a lot like Theon shooting the guy that was holding a knife to Bran's neck. It was a risk, but it was a good risk. You had to do something, and if you just let that guy dictate, he was like, well, you have to kill the direwolves, you have to kill these people. It's like, no, better to take a chance and try to kill the man. Same thing here. The Septry was burned to the ground, but it would have been really difficult for them to enter the sept to try to fight in the halls, and the mummers would have killed a lot of them. Instead, they just lost one man, Kyle the Archer, who was immediately avenged by Lem. And it also goes to show, this battle also displays just how amazing in battle Beric and Thoros are with their flaming swords. Beric, first of all, knows he can't really die. So, like, his brave, he was already extremely brave, but now he's like, well, I can't die. So I'm a brave man that can't be killed, so I'm going, this is hardcore. This is right into the thick of it. Thoros, on the other hand, his is more of a matter of faith. He's also a very brave man when it comes to combat, but he's also believes this whole thing is guided by R'hllor. Everything that's happening is R'hllor's hand. R'hllor resurrected Beric. Thus, Thoros is going to stick with Beric. That's R'hllor in action. He's not going anywhere but where R'hllor's work is happening right in front of him. So he's got that backing him. He's like, well, I'm not going to die unless R'hllor wants me to. And if that's the case, if it's my time, then it's my time. So he's got that sort of bravery going. And Arya enjoyed watching the battle. She liked seeing it. She liked seeing the arrows. She just liked seeing the tactics and just thought it was interesting. She took note of the justice given to the captured mummers led by Sept and Ut, who was a horrible, horrible man. The Septon is a pedophile and torturer, just a horrible dude. They hanged him. And so Arya took note of all this. She was like, this is how they're doing it. She kind of considered how her father would have approved of some of this, and the justice part especially. And it's so important. Here's a good example of what sort of loyalty and sentiment comes from people when they hear about deeds like this that Beric is doing on their behalf. Here is a very telling quote.
You swear he's not dead? The woman clutched Lem's arm. Bless you, Lem. That's the best tidings we've had in half a year. May the warrior defend him, and the Red Priest too.
Of course, it's no surprise that people hear rumors that Beric has been killed, because he was killed 6 times. Those were true stories. You're not supposed to go, how can we reconcile these? Oh, resurrection. That makes sense. That's what makes, like, we heard he was dead and then he's walking around. Like, how do you, they must have been lying. It's like, oh no, he did die. He was just raised from the dead. It all makes sense now. Yeah. But this goes to show, right, how important the BWB, especially Beric's leadership at the front, the Lightning Lord, he's such a symbol. Like, that's a very, like, that's good marketing right there. The Lightning Lord, right? Like, everybody likes that. That sounds cool. It sounds like, yeah, this guy's defending us. You never know where he's going to be. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. It comes, it goes quickly. It does its business. You can't grab it. You can't hold it. You can't capture it. It's cool. Like, people are going to like that. They can count on that. They can hope for that. There's reasons to buy in. And it's another reminder of the syncretism here. What did she just say? May the warrior defend him and the Red Priest too? People, regular commoners who've only ever worshipped the Seven are all of a sudden like, yay, Red Priest, yay, R'hllor. Like, that's crazy. Like, these are people, this place has been Seven worshipping and just about that's it for eons. But you show them some love, show them some loyalty, show them you're willing to die for them, to protect them. Yeah, we'll worship your God too. If you're going to do that, if you're going to be that cool, that good, that honorable, that noble, your goals are our goals now. Your beliefs are our beliefs. Like, if you're going to lead by example like that, yeah, we'll follow. And this moment, this attack at the sept, the burning of the septry and the justice done after, that is exactly why Gendry joins. It was their behavior. It was the example set by Beric. He specifically cites that. He's like, I like how you saved the commoners. I like how you did justice. And it's more than you think. It isn't just justice that he's doing. He's doing justice for the commoners. Coming up in a minute, I'll explain what that means. So it isn't just Beric's leadership, it's that syncretism. It's how he's brought together, or how they have brought together distinct groups of people that usually don't operate together at all. It's astonishing level of melting potism here. But it's not astonishing when you realize that they're united by very basic human ideals of justice, right to life, and basic happiness or dignity, right? But once again, George R. R. Martin is realistic. Not everyone follows Beric's justice. One example is the Mad Huntsman, a member of the Brotherhood who, to use a modern term, he was radicalized by Tywin's Reavers. His wife and sister were raped and murdered. His farm was destroyed. And he even killed his dogs. So his only purpose to life is revenge. So he's not about justice. He's more of the Stoneheart ilk rather than the Beric ilk. So he was already acting on his own. Remember what happened? He's the one who captured Sandor Clegane and was going to leave him in a crow cage and had left other people in crow cages until Tom and Anguy and others come along and are like, that's not what Beric condones. Yo, let him out. Like, get those people out of the crow cages and hang them properly. Even while Anguy's saying that, he laughs at the fact, like, yeah, Beric would have given them a trial. Then he would have hanged them. He's basically admitting that they're mock trials, that they're show trials, which is still better than no trial at all. I mean, if you know they're guilty and you've witnessed, everybody know those bloody mummers were guilty as hell. I mean, they're bloody mummers. They were caught red-handed sacking the sept. They still had the blood on their hands, you know? You don't really need a show trial's fine in that spot. Like everybody knows already. So let's move on to the next section where a lot of this justice is done. In one of their hideouts where the religious syncretism and cultural syncretism takes another step. The Hollow Hill. The Knights of the Hollow Hill, right? It's one of the more clever and thematic hiding places because it's a cave full of weirwood roots, which gives it that sort of protected but watched vibe. And an alliance with the old gods, lingering power. They already have a connection with the Ghost of Highheart. So you've got Relorism, the Seven, and the weirwood stuff here. You got the old gods. Look at that. All of it's here together. It's super cool. Here's a description from Arya's perspective of what the inside of the cave looks like. Quote.
A huge fire pit had been dug into the center. A huge fire pit had been dug in the center of the earthen floor, and its flames rose, swirling and crackling toward the smoke-stained ceiling. The walls were equal parts stone and soil, with huge white roots twisting through them like 1,000 slow, pale snakes. People were emerging from between those roots as she watched, edging out from the shadows for a look at the captives, stepping from the mouths of pitch-black tunnels, popping out of crannies and crevices on all sides. In one place on the far side of the fire, the roots formed a kind of stairway up to a hollow in the earth where a man sat almost lost in the tangle of weirwood.
We hadn't seen Bloodraven sitting on his weirwood throne when this scene happened, but when it happens 2 books later, it jumps back to this, looking like, whoa, that is extremely similar. Right down to the black cloak and the single eye, which Beric has. Not so similar when you compare R'hllor to the old gods, but it's still the old gods vibe here with the weirwood throne. And then there's a trial by combat, by definition a religious event. It's normally knightly combat, which is a 7 thing, but it's done under the auspices of R'hllor. So again, you just have this cool and interesting mix of different religious ideals and traits. So, and this, of course, all happens right before the Hound duels Beric. Earlier in the episode, I said that there's only twice where the phrase Brotherhood Without Banners appears in the main text. I gave you the first. Here's the second. Quote.
But when the Hound made to step toward his foe, Thoros of Myr stopped him. First, we pray. He turned toward the fire and lifted his arms. Lord of Light, look down upon us. all around the cave, the Brotherhood Without Banners lifted their own voices in response. Lord of Light, defend us!
So as you can see, it was narrated that time rather than spoken. Now, a bunch of dudes and dudettes praying to fire is definitely going to freak out the Hound, but he obviously handles himself well enough in the duel. This brings us to a notable point. This is where Beric finishes that earlier quote to Sandor. Remember, he was describing the basics of the Brotherhood Without Banners, the 60 men, and what they've become. He, at first, before I bisected the quote, he described what they were. But here's the follow-up, the finisher, where he describes what they are now. Quote,
60 brave men and true, led by a fool in a starry cloak. A scarecrow of a man, he wore a ragged black cloak speckled with stars, and an iron breastplate dinted by 100 battles. A thicket of red gold hair hid most of his face, save for a bald spot above his left ear where his head had been smashed in. More than 80 of our company are dead now, but others have taken up the swords that fell from their hands. When he reached the floor, the outlaws moved aside to let him pass. One of his eyes was gone, Arya saw, the flesh about the sockets scarred and puckered, and he had a dark black ring all around his neck. With their help, we fight on as best we can, for Robert and the realm.
they have a bit of that Hydra quality. Cut off one head and two more grow, although Beric himself is different. Cut him down, he just gets back up. As word spread that this group is about the commoners, many were eager to help. As we've seen, a lot of that's just word of mouth. Like the Brotherhood wouldn't have even gone to some of these places, but friends, tell neighbors, and they're all eager to help. Because it's just, they're so starved for anyone to care about them and to give them dignity and a chance at life. It's a rare thing, super rare. So the Brotherhood is just constantly in flux as their mission changes, their leadership changes, their options change, and they're not done changing even now. They're still changing, even where we've left things, where the books are at this moment. It's also really a brilliant challenge to the concept of knighthood, right? Sandor hates knighthood because he thinks it's a lot of crap, it's a lot of bull. But the Brotherhood gives him an alternative argument to knighthood. It shows that it can be about character, not about class, not about birth, but merit. Sandor should accept that argument. That's a fair point, but he's just so bitter about knighthood to admit that Beric has a good point there. And that's a really interesting debate they have. Stephen Atwell, full credit to him for this idea. I did not come up with that one. That was a really good call. That it's a real... Before the trial by combat of swords, they have a war of words about the concept of knighthood and how Sandor has a narrow view of it. And even though his trauma is real and lived, he hasn't considered just viewing knighthood in a different lens like these folk have. So Sandor mocks them. That's part of his defense, and his defense mechanism generally is to mock them, while also saying he's like them, in that they're all guilty, that they're all killers. Yeah, I'm a killer, but so are you. You know, he's like, your shit stinks as bad as mine. Sansa Stark does this, though. Sansa's very presence threatens Sandor's sense of righteousness. She is the living embodiment that he's wrong, that there is a reason to do good in this world. He's terrified of that. He's terrified of being wrong because he doesn't want to admit that he's lived his life amorally, because if he has to face that he's lived an amoral life when he actually had a reason to be a good person all along, if he could just set aside his bitterness, he's terrified of realizing he's lived his life wrong all along. He's also desperate, unloved, broke, and hates and full of self-loathing. So he's terrified of confronting that reality. He's far more afraid of that than of death. He's not afraid to die. He's basically provoking them with his hands tied. Yeah, go ahead and kill me. He's not afraid of them at all. He is totally ready to die because of how much he's suffering and hating himself. And he's desperate to prove as well to them, but also to himself, that they're not better than him. He's desperate to maintain that facade. He's in denial because it's not really true. He's not better than them. They are better. They are arguably better than him, and he doesn't want to face that. He's legitimately surprised that they serve King Robert. That just kind of throws him for a loop. He's like, the dead king? Like, what's that all about? He hates the pretense. He hates pretense just like he hates it on knighthood and thinks the ribbons and the oils and all the sacred stuff is just a bunch of crap. He hates pretense in all of its forms. So he also just shreds the argument that they aren't outlaws. Like, yes, you're outlaws. Yes, you're guilty of war crimes. He hates that they are in denial about that. He thinks it's hypocrisy. And he thinks that a perfect example of their hypocrisy is you want to blame people for what they've done. You don't want to take responsibility for the harm that you cause, but you want to sit here and blame me for what my brother did? I'm not Gregor. I'm Clegane, but I'm not guilty of other Clegane crimes. And this really makes him mad, and it's a good point, because, yeah, it's not his fault what Gregor did. But then Arya steps in and says, Micah, you killed Micah. That's a murder. That's real. And Sandor starts to lose his moral high ground because he says, well, I was following orders. George was very deliberate with that one, right? No one's going to be like, oh, yeah, he was just following orders. That argument doesn't fly. Come on, you were just following orders. Yeah, right. That doesn't absolve you at all. And Beric is like, yeah, we were following orders. The king's orders, right? Huh? You going to use that orders line on me, bro? I've got that. I can throw that right back in your face. So this whole thing, it's super interesting, right? But before they actually have their duel, this duel of words is far more interesting, even though it's an amazing duel. I'm not downplaying how awesome. It's arguably better than the Red Viper versus Gregor. It's super interesting. So it's also a culmination, though, of Beric's new way of doing justice, his radical new justice. What's radical about it? What's different about trials and trials by combat? They're not supposed to be for commoners. Trials and trials by combat are for the nobility. Beric is extending the umbrella of justice to everyone. That's very radical. Sandor would never have been on trial for killing a peasant. So it's not just who's on trial, it's for who they inflict that crime against. If Sandor had killed another noble, trial. Sandor killing Micah, no trial. Beric says there should be. Yet, it looked like Beric was going to let him go. It looked like Beric was going to be like, yeah, you were ordered to do it. Beric was almost ready to accept that argument of, yeah, you were following orders from your sovereign. Until the idea of trial by combat came up, and Sandor was like very ready to. He's like, well, he doesn't believe in this fire stuff. He doesn't believe in this pretense, but he's like, well, if you want to decide this by swords, I'm all for that, because he's very confident in his ability with the sword. Now, Sandor was trying very hard to paint everyone around him as not as selfless as they're saying. It's like, you guys act selfless, but you're not. You're all out for yourselves. You're out for survival. It doesn't really make you any better than these other people. But Beric, again, backfoot Sandor repeatedly. Sandor's like, oh, okay. Your breastplate versus my nakedness? He's like, okay, I'll take my breastplate off. Every time Sandor tries to point out Beric's hypocrisy, Beric responds and counters it. And he's like, no, I will face you. He's like, Sandor didn't even expect Beric to fight him. He's like, who's going to fight me? You. And he's like, Beric's like, no, me. I delivered the sentence. I will fight you. Sandor wasn't expecting that. He was expecting hypocrisy. And at every turn, Beric did not deliver hypocrisy. He delivered straightforward. He delivered honor. And Sandor doesn't know what to do. Sandor's like, okay, then let's fight. Like, that I understand. This war of words isn't going my way, but this other thing. And even later, when they go looking for Beric, they don't know where he is. They're like, well, let's start looking where the need is greatest, where the commoners are most suffering. That's where Beric will be. That just screams good guy. I mean, Sandor is trying to argue this man's not selfless. Beric Dondarrion is selfless. And they used supernatural help, or rather additional supernatural help, because again, Beric did face Sandor, but he knew he couldn't die. So it's a little bit tricksy there. He's like, yes, I will risk my own body against you in trial by combat, but I can't die. He could still lose, though, as he did. So that in that sense, it was fair. He took less risk, but Sandor still had to win. And of course, they're being led by the undead. They have a flame-reading priest. They sit in a werewood throne. This group is all surrounded by werewood, supernatural magic stuff. It's baseball season, which for me means lots of distractions. I'm always like wanting to look at the scores or just see what's happening, check the news in case someone got hurt or some player got promoted or demoted, whatever. Rise is really good at keeping me from doing that too often. I swear to you that it probably saves me 15, 20 minutes a day. It just pops up and say, are you sure you want to be looking at this right now? And I've told it what's good and what isn't. I say YouTube is fine because I have to do research on YouTube. I don't have to do research on baseball, though. That's not part of my work. That's fun. That's my time. I should be doing that when I'm done with work, but sometimes I can't help myself. Rise, like I said, probably saves me 15 to 20 minutes a day of work, or converts 15 to 20 minutes a day of idle time or of goofing off into work. That really adds up. That's an hour and a half a week, right? Depending on how many days a week you work. That adds up to, 5-6 hours a month. That's a lot. That's a whole work day. Or close to it, right? So I think that's a pretty big deal. If you can, a piece of software that can just kind of sit in the background and remind you to stay focused, even if it's only saving you a few minutes a day, maybe not as much as me, that still adds up to a lot. And maybe it saves you more than that. Maybe you are even more distractible than me. Maybe it saves you 20, 30 minutes a day. Maybe it saves you an hour a day. That's a lot of productivity. I don't know how to put a price on that, but Rise is not expensive, so I think it's worth it. Westeros 3, with that code, you get 25% off all payments in the first 3 months. So you could check out Rise, see if it helps, see if you save those minutes, and then spend the money on it. You get through the trial and say, yeah, this is saving me money. It's worth spending on, right? That's how I see it. It's working for me. So I got to figure that at least some of you all out there, it will help you as well in the same way. Or maybe you have an experience more like a Shayas, who's it's a lot more structured, a lot more, well, you explain it. You say it. I don't need to speak for you.
Yeah, I do use Rise like you're describing, because I do get distracted just like anyone else. But I also get too locked in, too focused. I just need something that says, hey, stretch your legs. Hey, get up, like get a drink. Do something else for a minute, and so yeah, it's helpful for locking in and for checking out. I don't know. I think it's helpful for focus both ways. Your habits are, yeah. Help those. Oh, Aziz, hold on, you are muted. Oh,
yeah, it can help with your better habits and sort of tamp back your bad habits, I suppose, maybe is a way to summarize that. Once again, the link is in our description. It's rise.io, and you can get the site is RIZE, and you can get the code Westeros3 for 25% off all payments in the first 3 months. I also want to remind you all that I stream on Twitch almost every Friday playing Crusader Kings 3 with the A Song of Ice and Fire mod. It's extremely well detailed, super cool, and we have what's called the Large Council, which is y'all listeners who are watching along and helping me make decisions. One of the things we do regularly is work together to name children. 3 weeks ago, we named all our kids Arthurian names. So we have our heir became Arthur Osgrey. That's right, we're playing House Osgrey. Arthur Osgrey. Lord Arthur Osgrey is now in charge. The next week, we did lead singers. So we have Ozzy Osgrey. That name popped up, and a few other famous singers got in there. And then this last week, we did Star Wars in honor of May 4th and just Andor being on TV. So we have, for example, a Marva Osgrey and a 3PO Osgrey and things like that. It's great times. Hang out with other A Song of Ice and Fire fans like yourselves and delve deep into the gaming world of things. Play a full dynasty, see what happens over the course of centuries. It's great fun. Every Friday, 6 o'clock on Twitch. History of Westeros. Dom Tartaglia says, and Steven is now an Iron Man side character. They named the Stark Industries union rep for him. Really?
Yes, Spencer Ackerman wrote. Yes, Spencer Ackerman is a writer for Iron Man and named an Iron Man character after Steven Atwell. Yes.
I did not know that. Yeah, Steven was a big fan. Yeah. And we know Spencer Ackerman. We follow each other on Twitter. He's a great guy. But I did not know this. Yeah, Blue Sky now. Yeah, you're right. He's not on Twitter anymore. Not on X anymore. So that's cool. That's awesome. I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing that, Tom. Let's talk about High Heart. It's a prominent piece of their piecemeal puzzle. They have all sorts of people, as we said, and represent the well-known gods. Most of them follow the Seven, but they've been made knights by Beric and each other under Thoros, so they're Relorist Seven worshippers, kind of. And here, of course, they're communing with werewoods, effectively. Yeah, it just adds more to their amalgam of options here. It's really cool. As we wondered about during the Ghost of Highheart episode, which wasn't that long ago, why did they go there in the first place? It's doubtful they were looking for her specifically. I think that was probably a happy accident. Although maybe they were like, let's go seek out this prophetess of the Riverlands, of the strange places. They maybe let's see what that's all about. But it's because it was shunned and has great visibility, that makes it a good hideout. If no one wants to go there, well, that's a good reason to go there. It makes it a good hideout if no one's there. And the visibility, like I said, well, that's just useful for making sure no one sneaks up on you. Most of our coverage of the Ghost of Highheart was on her prophecies and a bit about her, but they used her a lot to just find each other. Like she's like a Google Maps or a geolocation thing. She knew where Beric was. She could just concentrate or feel the energy flow. I don't know how to describe the magic happening, but she could do that. Or was it just with Beric? Could she do Beric because he's undead and he's like quite a unique individual? Or can she do that with Stoneheart? And we're also close to moving on to the Stoneheart era of the BWB in this episode, but while thinking about the Ghost of Highheart, will they ever interact again? She accepted undead Beric, even though she was calling him Lord of Corpses and kind of insulting him. He didn't like that. But it's the same flame. Like Beric passed the flame of life to Catelyn, so it's like sort of the same being in a sense. But also, there's a bit of a conundrum here. I'm not sure that the Ghost supported the Brotherhood because just they sang the song for her. I feel like because they're helping the commoners, that's part of why she's helping them, which means she might not be so eager to help Stoneheart. She freaked out at Arya. She's like, oh my God, Arya, ghost, blood child, wolf child. Like looking into her future was very dark and it caused her to think about Summerhall. It was bad. Part of that's Arya's vindictive and has lots of revenge on her mind. She's traumatized. Catelyn's worse. Catelyn's got these trauma thoughts and these vindictive thoughts, and she's dead. So I think that if Arya was scary to the Ghost of Highheart, I think Stoneheart might be scarier. I mean, not even her being dead part, or him being dead part, or her being dead part. Yeah, because Beric being dead didn't freak the Ghost out. It was like the vindictiveness, the revenge, the dark future. And I think that might be what she sees in Stoneheart. Maybe not. Maybe she sees the future of Stoneheart as like, oh, well, you're not a problem. They didn't even put you on TV. Why do I care? No, that's part of why we said this episode is so different than what you saw on TV, is because they cut characters like Stoneheart and they made the Brotherhood evil. Not evil. The Brotherhood's never been evil. But on the TV, they made the Brotherhood like dark right away. Like they sold Gendry to Melisandre very early on in their arc. So it's not like they slowly declined into evil. It's like, no, they were pretty bad right away. It's like, just because of that single act, they sold a guy. Like, that's awful, right? It's not like a ransom. That's how they frame it. Like, oh, it's just a ransom. No, you know what she's going to do to him.
He sold like a teen, too.
Yeah.
I know. Guy, whatever, but like they sold a child. Like Gendry was pretty young still.
Instead of just casting Edric Storm. So, yeah. Here's a passage that Stephen Atwell calls one of the most important in all of A Storm of Swords. It comes right after Arya tries to ride off, but is caught by Harwin, and it reflects back on what we were saying earlier about the class distinction and this struggle and Arya's realization here. Quote,
"The look she gave him was full of hurt. I thought you were my father's man."
"Lord Eddard's dead, milady. I belong to the Lightning Lord now, and to my brothers."
"What brothers?" Ord Hullen had fathered no other sons that Arya could remember.
"Angai, Lem, Tom of Sevens, Jack, and Greenbeard, all of them. We mean your brother Rob no ill, milady, but it's not him we fight for. He has an army all his own, and many a great lord to bend the knee. The small folk have only us."
He gave her a searching look.
"Can you understand what I am telling you?" "He gave her a searching look. Can you understand what I am telling you?" "Can 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 you understand what Yeah, Arya expected Harwin to be loyal to her, but it didn't even occur to her that it would be otherwise. So the idea that Robb isn't the good guy is bizarre to her. Not that he's necessarily the bad guy, but he kind of is, because his men are doing some pillaging too. Not as much as the Lannisters, but they are doing it. So Harwin is just a different man now. He's no longer, his past has changed. Like so many of these people, his past is the past. He is now a brother of the Brotherhood Without Banners, and what he did in the past is irrelevant. They have earned his loyalty in a way the Starks never did. And the Starks could have, maybe, you could imagine Harwin's in battle and Ned Stark leads them really well and his leadership is the reason they survived. You could see that being something that binds him to him forever. But that didn't happen, so this happened. He's bound to Beric and Thoros forever instead because their shared experience and what they've gone through. The Ghost of Highheart reminds us, too, that Thoros is a flame reader. She says, yeah, you can look into your flames, but you won't see it here. It won't work here. So that's just a way to remind us that he has those powers. He's using that to help the Brother Without Banners, but we haven't seen it. We haven't actually seen, what his flame reading has amounted to for them. So it's still kind of an unknown quantity or unknown quality in terms of what good it does them. It surely does something, but I'm not sure what. But by the end of A Storm of Swords, he's no longer using the flame reading for the same purposes because it's a different leader. Beric would probably be like, hey, fine, do this, do that, find this, find that. Stoneheart would be making different requests than Beric. And for one thing, she'd be like, look for Arya. That'd be a big one. But maybe also look for their enemies. Look for Freys. Look for Lannisters. And another important distinction here is that Beric was like his best friend. Like, he loved Beric. He doesn't know Catelyn. I mean, he has respect for her. He reveres her in a way, but they're not like friends. He didn't love her prior to this. It's it is more of a traditional like leader-follower relationship, whereas Beric and Thoros they had a different kind of connection. They were very close. So Thoros is also, in that regard, he's also suffering because he lost his best friend. Under Stoneheart, let's get into the weeds with their leadership with the Hangwoman. Another person that just has a lot of nicknames. Stoneheart isn't her official name either. It's like Cold Hands or the Brotherhood Without Banners. She's got a bunch of nicknames. So they start off with Robin Hood vibes. Kidnapping and ransoming. That's Robin Hood's men did that too. It's common enough in brigand groups. But it just gets darker and darker. From merry men to murderous men, they're literally led by an undead lord, and their leadership takes advice from supernatural sources like flame readings and the Ghost of Highheart. Still, despite these flaws and red flags, not red banners, because they don't have banners, right? They're still mostly good, right? Especially from the perspective of common folk who they're fighting for. Most of them, anyway. Was it part of Beric's yearning to be done? Was he tired of living? Is that why he passed the flame to Catelyn? Was it his sense of nobility, his overwhelming sense of giving, like that his life was meant to be spent for the realm? But why Catelyn of all the possibility? Why her? Surely not just because she was a noblewoman of extremely high birth, or was that part of it? Is it just, she's the highest ranking person I can save? That doesn't seem like what the Brotherhood's about, but Beric is a little unique because he's a lord too. Even though he's for the commoners now, he's still, I don't know. It's a little confusing, a little hard to perceive. There might be more to it that George hasn't revealed yet. Again, it was Lord Eddard who sent them on this mission, and he would maybe recognize that was Lord Eddard's wife. So maybe that's part of the connection. I don't know. But whatever his reasoning, she took the Brotherhood on a much darker path. Just like there's rumors of Beric dying a bunch of times, which were true because he did die a bunch of times. There's also rumors of Stoneheart, this undead being or this creepy, strange-looking woman that leads the Brotherhood. There were rumors of it, like I said, but there's also Arya's dream. She had that wolf dream. But the actual first on-screen reveal of Stoneheart as a moving being, rather than just a body, comes famously in the epilogue of A Storm of Swords. The first epilogue of the whole series. There's only one other one in A Dance with Dragons. Just like the prologues, of course, the character is doomed. It's Merritt Frey, obviously. He's hanged just after they show him that they've already hanged his cousin Peter, who he came to ransom. Like, the guy you came to ransom is already hanging? Yep, you're next. That he ends the chapter dead is not surprising, but the reveal of their leader is, right? That's super different. Like, that was the surprising part. Thoros, again, loved Beric. He has different feelings about Lady Stoneheart. One of her other nicknames is the Silent Sister. When Brienne asks about the Lightning Lord, this is what Thoros says in response. Quote,
Lightning comes and goes, and then is seen no more. So too with men. Lord Beric's fire has gone out of this world, I fear. A grimmer shadow leads us in his place.
a grimmer shadow. That's true. It's certainly interesting that they just unquestionably accepted her leadership. I guess it's because it was the demonstrative and almost literal passing of the torch, the passing of the flame of life from Beric. It's like, well, it kind of says you're the new leader because our old leader basically gave his life to make you alive. It's just a very dramatic way to do it, but it's also kind of hard to deny his intent. Again, under Beric, we saw the shift from fighting Gregor and Lannisters to fighting to save the commoners from the Lannisters, and then from other broken men and from starvation. All these things are still problems, right? There's still broken men out there. There's still starvation out there, and there's still Lannisters out there causing harm, along with some other people too. But under Lady Stoneheart, of course, those priorities have changed. They're still doing some of those things, but their top priority is much different. Instead of justice, it's revenge. And instead of trying to save the commoners, their focus is to try to find and locate one specific person, which is Arya. A lot of the random helpers have fallen off. They're not as beloved as they used to be. They're not the same organization, which means they don't have the same appeal to the commoners. And some of the people that are in the organization are no longer good people. They've become dark and hateful and the thing that they have been fighting against in some cases. That's what they are. And others are just dead. Thoros says it quite succinctly to Brienne here. Quote,
Justice. Thoros smiled wanly. I remember justice. It had a pleasant taste. Justice was what we were about when Beric led us. Or so we told ourselves. We were kingsmen, knights and heroes. But some nights are dark and full of terror, my lady. War makes monsters of us all.
Are you saying you are monsters?
I am saying we are human. You are not the only one with wounds, Lady Brienne. Some of my brothers were good men when this began. Some were less good, shall we say. Though there are those who say it does not matter how a man begins, but only how he ends. I suppose it is the same for women.
It's really sad. Thoros is just like looking for answers. He's just, maybe this is okay. Maybe this is right. He's helpless at this point. He used to be a leader of this group, but now he's bound by his religion to continue to see this through, even though he has no idea where it's going, even though he's depressed and doesn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They're literally in a cave. He can't see the positive outcome from this, but because his God is in charge here, because his God has raised their leader up multiple times, he's got to follow along, even though it's not going anywhere good. They have become paradoxically broken and hardened at the same time. They're more used to the depredations and warfare and suffering, but less capable of being human, which is what they're fighting for. They're fighting for humanity and humans, even while their leader is not among the living. It's almost as if Sandor was right when he said, Knights? Dondarrion's a knight, but the rest of you are the sorriest lot of outlaws and broken men I've ever seen. I've shit better men than you. It's like he was right a little early on that one, you know? And he was wrong when he said it at the time, but it became true eventually. Not that he could have predicted these particulars, but it's hard to say he's wrong when they're doing the kind of things they're doing now. Even though they still are doing some good things, they're doing violent things, and sometimes that violence is aimed at the worst people. Like they do kill the rest of Rorge and Biter's group, and that was good. Brienne's glimpse into the Brotherhood is just so much different than Arya's. That's a clear thing here. and much briefer too, at least so far. She's still with them, so maybe it'll end up being lengthy. But Thoros is explicit. That quote, he didn't pull punches, even as he's searching for answers, even as he's saying, well, we're doing evil things now, but as long as we finish well, it'll be okay. Which is like, are you going to finish well? He might, actually. Maybe he'll end heroically and doing good things. Maybe he'll fight the others or something like that. But just ravaging the Riverlands and searching for Arya, by itself, I don't know. That maybe won't save your soul all by itself.
It's kind of makes me think about it being the journey, not the destination type quote,
Yes.
Like things George may be ruminating on with his own writing, it's like how you end it, or maybe it's about the journey. I don't know.
That's a good one. That's a good point. And Brienne confronts him, says, are you saying you're monsters? And he's like, he says no. He doesn't say no. He says, I'm saying we're human, but he's saying humans can become monsters if they're pushed enough. So he's kind of saying yes without saying yes. But he also says they are not without a chance at redemption. He doesn't want to say they're too far gone that they can't come back. That's the part he won't admit, because it's tough to admit that, and it might not be true. It might be that there's still a chance at redemption for them. I think if there's a chance of redemption for someone like Jaime, why not them? Maybe not Stoneheart, because she's undead, and that's a whole different thing. But the rest of them, maybe. Flipping back to a kind of fun and exciting plot line rather than a dark and depressing one, we have Riverrun. One of the most exciting things they've done is infiltrate this castle. Tom O'Sevens shows how effective a bard spy can be. Yeah, in real life and in a lot of fantasy stories, the bard is often a spy. It's true in The Witcher, a couple others I can't think off the top of my head. But just like Mushroom, the dwarf jester, entertainers often have insider access just by being in the room when important things are discussed. They are ignored, but they pick up important information. Singers aren't common in Westeros, so they can often get jobs and invitations just by being around. And that gives them access to what we were saying. Gossip, information, maybe more, maybe straight up secrets. Tom has been doing exactly that. Travel parties in particular. Somehow he's sending information out about which Freys are going where. And that's huge, because that's how they learned about Merritt Frey. They learned Merritt Frey was coming and they hanged him. Well, actually, that's not too different, because that one they just tricked him into thinking a ransom would be paid. The Freys stopped falling for that trick. Like, yeah, they're not going to pay the ransom. They're going to take your money and kill them. So after that stopped working, they just simply passed these messages along and ambushed these Freys. Ryman Frey is the heir to the twins. The heir to the twins. He was hanged at Fairmarket. Out in the open, like brazenly. Jaime is annoyed by their audacity. But for the Brotherhood, it must have been quite a scene. They must have been like, yeah, we got a big one. We got the heir to the twins. That's their biggest get yet. Well, now they have Jaime. That's bigger. But before that, this is huge. He would have been shouting about how much he's worth. He would have been like, no, ransom me. I'm the heir to the twins. I'm worth so much. They're like, you're worth so much more to us. Dying. We're going to enjoy this so much. No amount of money would make this, which is too bad, right? Like, they could take that money and alleviate the starvation. That's what Beric probably would have done, right? That's the difference. Like, yeah, those Freys do kind of deserve to hang, but isn't it more important to feed those commoners than to kill this man? Not to Lady Stoneheart. Tom has been shown to be a womanizer. That's a common play. By the way, this episode is going to end up being a little longer than normal, I suppose, on the longer end. And we've hardly gotten to delve into the specifics of a lot of the individual members. Like, Beric's come up a lot, Thoros is a lot. But, like, there's a lot of colorful characters in this group that we've not been able to spend much time on. So some other time we'll have to maybe examine some individual stories. So, yeah, Tom, womanizer, might have slept with Lady Smallwood. That might be part of why she's an ally. Jaime doesn't know any of this. But he casually tells Tom, if he wants to win a job, if you want to win a permanent position, you need to talk to Jenna Lannister. She's the one you should impress. Jenna is the one who really rules around here. Emmon Frey's the Lord, but Jenna's in charge. And we've seen that in play. Like, Jaime's almost certainly right about that. She's the new Lady of Riverrun. She's Jaime's aunt. Now, Tom's intent was to be Jaime's singer. He's like, I want to work with you. Because we know what his goal is there. He's going to infiltrate Jaime's group and get Jaime captured. Of course, that ends up happening anyway, as I keep saying. But that was what Tom was trying to do. And that's when Jaime suggests, well, you know, instead, why don't you do this? Try to get a job here. And Tom's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that. So the implication, putting together the womanizing, the sleeping around, and Jaime straight up suggesting that's the one whose favor you need to win. It's not unlikely that Thomas Evans will sleep with Jenna Lannister. Aemon has had children with her, and there's no indication that these aren't his kids, but she openly talks down to him, openly says she didn't want to marry him. You know, she was against the marriage when it happened. She was so proud of Tywin for standing up against it, because Tywin is like a 10-year-old was like, this is an embarrassing match, you know? As a 10-year-old, he said that, and Jenna loved it because it kind of was. Anyway, so that's pretty interesting. But Tom's perhaps most valuable play, since he's staying at Riverrun, he could play a crucial role in the so-called Red Wedding 2.0. Letting the Brotherhood in, or letting an army or some violent men inside Riverrun while the Lannisters and Freys don't expect it. And why is it called the Red Wedding 2.0? Because it could happen during a wedding, and that wedding would be Davin Lannister, Jaime's cousin, son of Stafford Lannister. He is going to marry a Frey. We don't know which Frey he's going to marry yet, but it's going to be a Frey. Given Riverrun is held by Aemon Frey and Jenna Lannister, it's a really good candidate for this location for this marriage to take place, for them to create this marriage and to basically make a statement that they're the new rulers of Riverrun. Davin's also the Warden of the West, so he's a really high-ranking officer type. And we've already seen via the Blackfish how just slightly raising the gate of one of the portcullises enables a person to slip under and then swim away. So there's just the ways that we've been subtly told Riverrun can be infiltrated. We've got a spy on the inside. We've seen logistical methods on how Riverrun can have men let in. We've seen an escape from Riverrun when Jaime tried to get out. With Tyrion's like mummer and lockpicking guy and all that. So we've seen lots of things happen that are related to this at Riverrun, not to mention boats. Men could sail down the Red Fork or the Tumblestone to sneak up on Riverrun at night, knowing that with the knowledge that someone's going to let them in. Yeah, there's a lot of options here, and that's part of why this is such a popular theory, because there seems to be a lot of foreshadowing for it and a lot of groundwork. And if, let's say that wedding happens, let's say there's a Frey Lannister marriage going to take place at Riverrun. They announce that. This is as bad as the Boltons announcing a Bolton Stark marriage at Winterfell, in the ruins of Winterfell. The commoners, the old guard nobles, are gonna hate it. The Riverlords all hate the Freys, and they don't like the Lannisters. They're not Riverlords. They're Westermen. They don't want this? They liked the Tullys. The things under the Tullys were good, right? And they're at least Riverlords that handled themselves honorably. So everyone's going to hate this. It won't be hard to get a grassroots movement of commoners. And remember what we said earlier? Hundreds, if not thousands of them out there. And who treated the commoners best? Edmure Tully, besides the Brotherhood. Edmure Tully specifically brought commoners inside Riverrun when the war was happening to give them better protection. No other lord would have done that because it takes too much food up. And who kicked them back out when he took charge? Blackfish. Kicked them back out when the castle was about to be besieged by the Lannisters. He's like, well, y'all don't want to be trapped in here, and we can't keep you in here, so I'm sorry, this is terrible, but we got to kick you out. So they might not like that, but they will remember Edmure, who was the actual lord and who did things well. Now, Thoros has a vision. Let me finish this section with this vision of Thoros that he has. He sees lions at Riverrun. He sees an island in a sea of fire. His interpretation is that the Lannisters are going to besiege Riverrun. He tells this to Arya, and Arya's like, no. But what if he had it backwards? What if it's the Lannisters being attacked, not the Lannisters attacking at Riverrun? They have the castle now, so it's feasible that they will lose it and well, that's what Thoros could be seeing here. In the same breath, Thoros admits that he reads the flames wrong sometimes. Right? Very possible. So there's your Red Wedding 2.0. There's a lot more to that theory, but, it's not all about the Brotherhood. Just a lot. So maybe we'll come back to that some other time. If you have other Red Wedding 2.0 theories, I'm all ears. We're all ears. But let's move on. Hildy and other spies. Who's Hildy? That name probably sounds familiar to y'all, but you might not remember exactly who she is. When Jaime arrives at Raventree Hall after Riverrun, he goes to relieve or to finish the siege of the Brackens taking Raventree Hall from the Blackwoods. Of course, the Blackwoods refuse to surrender to the Brackens, but are okay to surrender to Jaime. And when Jaime arrives, Lord Bracken is in his tent, humping a camp follower named Hildy, who proceeds to flirt with Jaime very brazenly. In earlier drafts of A Dance with Dragons, Hildy is explicitly a member of the Brotherhood Without Banners as a spy. She's a sex worker spy, another insider type, like a singer that can get intimate information, even more intimate than a singer. Well, maybe not more than a singer who sleeps around. Same difference, right? So we're not certain she's a spy, given the redrafts and rewrites, but she probably is. It's probably just George didn't make it explicit, right? Especially because we have Tom trying to hang out with her. Tom trying to hang out with Jaime, trying to get hired by Jaime in order to pass information about his location. Then we actually have Stoneheart and Brienne capturing him. So he's been a target for a while. So Hildy was probably targeting him too. That's the implication, and it makes a lot of sense because, well, that scene is a little like something's going on here. Are we really just a flirtatious sex worker? Is that really all this is about? This is really just Jaime showing how he's still loyal to Cersei. That is also being done here. But I really think George always does it so much at once. I can't imagine that's the only thing happening in that scene. It's also not just a way to show Jonas Bracken being a man of a little lower quality, So makes a ton of sense. And it just makes you think. Okay, so Hildy the sex worker is a spy. Tom the singer is a spy. Who else? There's probably a ton of them out there. Anyone could be BWB loyal, right? Because any given person in the Riverlands could easily have a grievance against the Lannisters.
There might even be BWB sympathizers in the room right now. Whoa.
Careful, y'all.
You might be one.
I am one.
I'm one. I might be one too. Our chat, full of them.
Weigh in if you are too, chat, but don't risk yourself. Good thing you're all using assumed names here with our internet names. Yeah. So this is less of a shift from earlier BWB and more of a development. What I mean by that is earlier on, remember what I said early on that they had to learn how to be outlaws? This is what I'm talking about. Hildy wasn't a spy when the war broke out, but she became one because it was necessary. She had to, fight for her people, fight for whatever she's fighting for. Just like Tom wasn't sending secret messages about the movements of Freys when he was just a traveling singer who wanted to get laid. They didn't know how to do that stuff when this war began. They're acquiring skill. What is it like that movie Taken? He's like, I have a specific set of skills. Yeah, they've acquired a specific set of skills by being in war. Skills they did not have when the war hadn't broken out yet. So I don't have any other suggestions. I'm just saying, anyone out there could be BWB, and that's fascinating and fun and interesting. George has laid some groundwork for some surprises because it could come from any direction. There's just so many possibilities here. Speaking of people with unique skill sets, let's talk about the real-world Brotherhood Without Banners fan group. Earlier, I mentioned that the Brotherhood Without Banners fan group appears in the appendices. And here is one of those quotes from George in the A Feast for Crows appendix.
Thanks also to my readers for all their kind and supportive emails and for their patience. Special tip of the helm to Lodi of the Three Fists, Pod, the Devil Bunny, Trebla and Daj, the Trivial Kings, Sweet Caress of the Wall, Lannister, the Squirrel Slayer, and the rest of the Brotherhood Without Banners, that half-mad, drunken fellowship of brave knights and lovely ladies who throw the best parties at Worldcon year after year after year.
We've been to some of those parties. We were inducted, Shay and I, into the Brotherhood Without Banners in 2018 in San Jose. We were the free company of the Green Leaf. Each year's inductees get a...
They pivoted. They've rebranded it. They are now called free companies, and each year has a different free company. Originally, the Brotherhood Without Banners, in order to be inducted in the Brotherhood Without Banners, you had to go on a quest in which you found a food for George. That became kind of an unwieldy thing to do every year. They phased it out. So now, in order to join the BWB and become a member of a free company, you do this shot of this liquor, this like fireball whiskey type thing. I forget what it was. You do like this liquor. If you don't drink alcohol.
It was like a habanero drink. It was so spicy.
And if you don't drink alcohol like me, you don't have to take a shot of an alcohol. You can take a shot of something non-alcoholic. Don't worry. They are not biased against those of us who don't drink. But it's not quite as difficult to join the BWB these days, but it has these fun group themes. And so, yeah, we're free company of the Green Leaf, ostensibly for the California and redwoods and all that, but really Green Leaf is pot. Yeah.
2018.
Well, you're muted.
2018 was the first year that Worldcon was in a weed legal city, so they addressed that accordingly. Now, hopefully, the BWB doesn't ever take the dark turn the Book Brotherhood does, but they're probably never going to be led by undead or anything like that. So we probably don't have to worry about that.
And we hope to see lots of them this year at Seattle Worldcon, which is in the middle of August.
Yeah, and you as well, folks. Come to Worldcon. Let us know if you're coming, and you'll get to meet us in person.
And you'll probably get inducted into a free company.
You very well likely will if you show up.
Yeah, so.
Be part of it forever. And now our quote of the week. Stories never really ended. They just rolled one into the next. The past was never wholly lost, and the future was never quite found. We wander forever in a pathless forest, dropping with weariness, as home draws us back and the grail drives us on, and we never arrive, and the quest never ends. That's The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman. It's an Arthurian novel, as you probably guessed by the mention of the Grail. I've mentioned this book last week, and I wanted to mention it one more time because it was good enough for multiple mentions. I really enjoyed it. It was written in 2023. Lev Grossman is the author of The Magicians. Very successful, very quality writing. Really liked it. If you like Arthurian stuff with a modern streak to it, it's still Arthurian. Only a little bit of modern element to it. I really appreciated it. Check it out. You can get it through our website. We've got Amazon links. You can order it hard copy or use the Audible link to get the audiobook version of it. And if you haven't used Audible before, you can sign up for a free trial through us, which the link is on the website. And that will get you one free download. So you could get The Bright Sword for free, try out Audible. And if you don't like it, just cancel the subscription. You've done nothing. You've cost yourself nothing, but you got a free book out of it. All right, let's discuss briefly who used to be in the group, who left, who might still be in the group and that we're not sure about, who they have as allies that we know of, and then we'll finish up with theories, looking ahead and theories. Under Lady Stoneheart, the lack of justice and loss of their original mission caused a lot of people to leave. They aren't bound to it as tightly as Thoros, or perhaps as just have no other options like someone like Lem. But some of them did. In particular, Edric Dane. Edric Dane was with the Brotherhood as a squire of Beric, and he felt duty-bound to Beric, even in his undead state, to continue on. That's what squires do, right? He never did get his knighthood, I suppose. Or he did. No, he did. He was knighted under R'hllor like everybody else, I suppose. Although no one calls him Sir Edric. But he's Lord Edric. No one calls him Sir Beric either, because he's Lord Beric. So there you go. And that's why he clearly had some place he could go because he's Lord Edric Dane. Starfall's his. So whenever he wanted to leave the Brotherhood, he had a castle waiting for him. I gotta believe a lot of the other characters who left went with him. In particular, Anguy the Archer, because Anguy the Archer's Dornish. So going to a Dornish lord makes a ton of sense, especially when the alternative is, living in caves, being hunted, and following the orders of Lady Stoneheart, who's a rather creepy individual. But there's also a lot of other of these names that we threw out who they're maybe a little too obscure for us to have follow-up with. Yet, we might hear these names later. George is pretty thorough, even with these super minor characters. Waddy the Miller, Swampy Meg, John O'Nutton, Melly, Puddingfoot, Merritt O'Moonta. You love John O'Nutton.
He be nuttin'.
He be
I don't know
nuttin'.
what to say. It's a really funny name.
My favorite is Swampy Meg.
Yeah, I mean, Swampy wouldn't be as horny to me except for the whole Cersei and Taina Merryweather thing.
Yeah, that's true.
The
Mirror
Mirror
Swamp. Is
Swamp.
Swampy
Oh,
Meg
no.
from Mirror?
Yeah.
Pello, aka Greenbeard, the Tyrashi sellsword that worked with the Brotherhood for a while, he might still be with the Brotherhood, but he may have left to just do food missions, because we know that Pello and the Mad Huntsman left with Sandor's gold a long time ago to go buy food and go bring it back for the commoners. We have not heard from them since. They may be just doing that. They may just be distributing food, but for all we know, they're dead or something else happened. But they're still out there. As far as we know, we haven't heard of either of them dying. The Mad Huntsman is particularly vicious and dangerous, but still mostly a good guy, as long as he's aimed at other bad guys. For sure, guys that we know are still with the group, with Stoneheart, Thoros, Harwin, Lem, Tom, Jack Be Lucky, who's also One-Eyed Jack, Gendry, Notch, likely Luke, Mudge, Beardless Dick. That's another ridiculous one there. Beardless Dick. That dude belongs in a porno. And Dennett. The most ordinary of the names there, Dennett. So some of them are spies. Tom's in Riverrun, Gendry's, at the inn doing smith work, pretending to be a smith. Well, he is a smith, but not pretending to not be a part of the Brotherhood. Meanwhile, working on their weapons and armor for them. People who are not explicitly in the Brotherhood, but are absolutely allies include Sharna, Husband, Boy, and Hot Pie at the end of the Kneeling Man. Remember, Sharna, Husband, and Boy were the ones who tried to set up the ambushes, and we use them as an example of sort of amoral banditry that's associated with the Brotherhood, even though this room of people they were feeding children, right? So that's good. They're feeding orphans, but they're robbing just regular folk to feed these orphans, which is not so good. They were also robbing Lannisters and Starks to feed the orphans, which I mind a lot less. And you all probably too. All those girls at the Stony Sept, Tansy, Bella, all those girls at the Peach were happy to give free favors to the Brotherhood because, well, it's a service they can offer. It doesn't cost them any money, and it helps the morale of the troops who were helping defend them. Jane, Willow Heddle, and the orphans at the Crossroads Inn that Gendry and the others are there helping take care of as well. Similar situation as the Inn of the Kneeling Man. We've got Lady Ravella Smallwood, a.k.a. Lady Ravella Swan at Acorn Hall, who is the one that had that really meaningful, sad moment with Arya where she's talking about, the horrors of war and how, you shouldn't have to go through all that and how she lost her own child, things like that. We mentioned Lord Lyman Leicester and Maester Rune. That's Lord Lyman's Maester, so they're both sympathizers as well. That's a pretty big one because that's a noble house, not just small folk. Ghost of Highheart, obviously. We talked about her. So there's a lot, and there's so many unnamed, as we've said. As Harwin indicated, there's hundreds, if not thousands of people, and the whole point is that it's a nameless mass. It's the common folk. It's not necessarily about the individuals. It's about the whole. Even though the individuals are important and very interesting as characters, in terms of their goals, in terms of the Brotherhood's goals, it's about the whole. So yeah, what's coming next? There's a lot out there. There's a lot of open possibilities, especially given the vast number of characters involved. Stoneheart's looking for Arya, and she wants to kill Freys and Lannisters. Is that going to come to a head at some point? Is she going to be part of the attack on Riverrun? Is she gonna recruit Blackfish? Is Blackfish gonna be like, whoa, you're my niece and you're dead? What the hell? Nymeria, the direwolf? We haven't even mentioned her yet. Like, she's out there too. Like, is she gonna play a role? Is Arya gonna, from Bravos, like, participate remotely? You know, there's a tale from the world of Ice and Fire of long ago when the children of the forest emerged from a hollow hill, that's the exact phrase used, to send hundreds of wolves against an Andal camp. Hundreds of wolves. We've got the hollow hill, and we've got hundreds of wolves in Nymeria's pack, or maybe 100. More than 100 anyway, so we'll go with hundreds, maybe. Andal camp. Could be a Lannister camp, or just something like that. It really it's got echoes of possible foreshadowing there, doesn't it? They could appear in the TWOW prologue. We've talked about the TWOW prologue and how it's set up to be probably an ambush of the Lannister forces bringing Edmure and Jane to Casterly Rock. Jaime's very concerned about an ambush on the way. And in fact, his concern might help the attack on Riverrun, because he's so concerned about an ambush to free Edmure and Jane that he gives 400 men to this party to protect them, which clearly is denuding Riverrun of some of its defenders. So by bulking up the defense of this hostage party, he may have made it easier to invade Riverrun. Yeah. And that's what is such a big challenge for Jaime, is no matter where he moves his troops, the Brotherhood's going to know about it right away, either from their internal spies or just from watching the roads. You can't move 400 men around the Riverlands without them seeing it. Everyone's on their side. Any single person witnesses this group, they pass the information on. There's no hiding that. So many possibilities there. You got the direwolves, you got the Blackfish, you got the Brotherhood themselves, you've got things that we haven't thought of. What if they end up going north? That's one thing that happened on the TV show that might have some semblance of truth, or at least possibility, that they decide, well, if we're really fighting for the realm and we're R'hllorists are supposed to stand against the darkness and shadow and cold. If they hear that's really happening, you could absolutely see them going there. Catelyn's original arc that George wrote out for her, the original plan, was that she would die beyond the wall. And I think it may have even involved the flame passing from her to Jon. That's not as explicit, but you could see that happening before he decided to maybe have that be Melisandre's thing instead, because the timing doesn't really work on that. Like, she's still way in the south and Jon is dead already. Like, is that really gonna... But it is a possibility other than Melisandre. We do have another option for Jon coming back. She also would want to defend the north, let alone Catelyn and her followers being R'hllorists now. They would want to stop the others just for the regular reasons of Catelyn's family is Winterfell, and if that would be one of the first castles to fall if they get through the wall, right? So that's just kind of straightforward. But what if there's just a new leader? What if Stoneheart's flame dies in the Riverlands and someone else takes over? What if, Beric passed it to her. She could pass it to somebody else. We've obviously just gone over the possibility of Jon, but it doesn't have to be him. It could be somebody else, or it could be someone else and then Jon. The passing of the flame thing is really interesting and probably not done yet. Will they fulfill their original mission? Sir Gregor is still out there. That was the first task they had, and they still haven't done it. Will they decide to, or get an opportunity to make good on that? Which is weird because he's dead also. So you got a dead Catelyn leading a group that's original mission was to kill a man who's now dead, but still walking around. He's obviously more tied to Sandor's arc and Cersei and stuff going on at King's Landing. But you could see them being involved somehow, especially because they're involved with Sandor in other ways. Will they discover that amongst their ranks, they call themselves King's men? Robert, the king, is who they're referring to. Will they realize or discover that they have the king's son as a member? Gendry is just right there, blacksmithing away with his coal black hair and his blue eyes, looking seed as strongy. They might be like, hey, this guy should be the king. They may promote their own claim and be like, hey, this is Robert's son. He should be the king. Joffrey's not really Robert's son, and he's dead anyway. And Tommen and Myrcella might be dead by the time this comes along, right? That would be a wild way for all those IOUs that the Brotherhood's handed out. We're like, yeah, we're going to take your food, your horse, your stuff. Here's an IOU, though. Sandor Clegane, here's your IOU. Just cash this in later. What if those are actually good later? What if, like, Gendry becomes the Lord of Storm's End? He's like, anyone with a Brotherhood Without Banners IOU, I will pay that. And then a bunch of people show up with, like, forgeries, and a few of them have real ones, you know? I could see that happening. Of course, there's also Edric Storm. He might be the one who ends up Lord of Storm's End. There's no automatics for Gendry here. But I love the idea that the guy they followed this dead king and his sons amongst their ranks, and neither he nor them knows about it. So any of the above, many of the above could happen, and it's difficult to get into the weeds because there's so many possibilities, and it's just like trying to figure out what order these things might happen in is tricky enough. But that whole revenge for the Red Wedding thing, the Red Wedding 2.0, that's a big one. That seems real likely. The slaughter of new inhabitants of Riverrun thanks to Tom's infiltration. Stoneheart would want that too. She would want that maybe as much or more than defending Winterfell from the others. Because at least one enemy she hates more. One might be more dangerous, but she's also farther away from them. So, another possibility is freeing of political prisoners who have a grudge against the Lannisters or Freys, like Great John. Great John was taken captive after the Red Wedding. He's still in captivity. Imagine that dude getting free, breaking his chains. That's their sigil. Watch out, Freys and Lannisters, if Great John ever gets back out again. House Mallister are imprisoned in their own castle. Patrick Mallister, Jason Mallister, they are held captive by Blackwalder in their own castle. If some commoners, some Brotherhood Without Banners maybe infiltrates there, or maybe they already have it infiltrated, they, let them out, let them free, get them out, something like that. That's another. The Mallisters were very staunch on fighting till the end, and it was only because Patrick Mallister was made a hostage, and Jason was like, okay, you got my son, you win. But if it wasn't for that, he would have fought on, as Tywin said, for honor's sake. So if Patrick and Jason are free, then honor will move to the front again, and the Mallisters would take the field. But despite all these possibilities, despite all these interesting options that could happen for the Brotherhood, it seems like, from a general perspective, it looks dark. Right? It doesn't look great. On the subject of their future, when they discuss it, when Thoros tells Brienne what he sees, he doesn't know. He doesn't have an answer. Quote.
We were king's men when we began, the man told her. But king's men must have a king, and we have none. We were brothers too, but now our brotherhood is broken. I do not know who we are, if truth be told, nor where we might be going. I only know the road is dark. The fires have not shown me what lies at its end. I know where it ends. I have seen the corpses in the trees.
That last line was in her thoughts. She didn't say that to Thoros, but she sincerely believes it. She has seen lots of hanged people, many of them outlaws, and she thinks that's really the only way it could go. Like, what other end is there for an outlaw? Right? Well, there are other endings. There are exceptions. Occasionally there's pardons. Maybe they could maybe someone could take the black. Maybe flee to Essos. Definitely wind up in bizarre fandom theories. If redemption is to come for any of them, well, this brings us back to the North. Going to fight the ultimate enemy would be, as Thoros says, a way to look at the ending of a person as what defines them and not what came before. Because if you end, especially if you die fighting mankind's ultimate enemy, I do think that's as good as you can do. I mean, you can't make up for other things, but that's giving your life. I mean, that's giving everything. That's giving everything you have. So I think that counts. I think if you're going to take that step, I would certainly be willing to overlook some past crimes if you give your life in defense of everyone. And how they slightly influenced Arya may hint at how they may help change someone else. For example, they now have Jaime. He's an enemy. He's a hostage. But Jaime and Brienne together. They may move the Brotherhood. They may cause them to rethink some things or challenge them in some ways. And if we know Jaime is to be partly redeemed, or if we expect that, maybe this is to come in part with his association with the Brotherhood. Maybe the Brotherhood is where he learns some of these things that he hasn't learned yet. He learns more about the plight of the common folk. He learns more about what his past actions have caused. He learns more about what this war has done, about what his family has done. Just growth, introspection, things that might happen for Jaime that are already happening, that might happen more. And the Brotherhood may be vital on that journey, especially because of his connection to some of the other characters. Remember the very beginning of Bran's first dream, where he pictures the mountain's black bloody helm in front of Jaime, with Jaime and Sandor standing in front. They're all tied together. The Brotherhood is all tied to that too. The Brotherhood's connection to Sandor, Gregor, is undeniable. And now they have the connection to Jaime too. These things are hard to perceive, but the groundwork is there. Jaime's redemption, the Brotherhood's redemption, Stoneheart, Brienne, they're very tied. And I'm so excited to see where it goes, whether it goes north, whether it stays in the Riverlands, whether it's both, something unexpected. So many members of the Brotherhood, it's just by itself that creates so many possibilities. And when you throw in all the supernatural elements, it really just creates even more mystery. It's like there's things we can't even perceive, things we can't predict. The Brotherhood, I think, are just so much more interesting than they appear on the surface when you really dive in. I'm only excited, or I am very excited. I'm only excited. I have no other emotions. I have no other emotions. Excitement is my only gear. Now, going through all this and reading it all to you and going through this episode definitely has me excited for the future of this group. They are presented with so many unknowns and so much. They're just so rich. So many different characters. We can relate to all these characters a lot more. They're so poor, really. They're not rich at all. These characters are a lot more relatable in a lot of ways than a lot of the nobles. Because they're nobles, like they're rich, they're privileged, like we can't relate to that. Like I can't relate to being a refugee either, to be fair. Like I don't identify with that, not because I couldn't, but because I haven't been through that. That would be unfair. It'd be shitty for me to claim I know what that's like. I don't. But I'd say I'm closer to that than, a Lannister. What's that?
I said, do you want to?
No, I'll pass. I'll pass on that, actually, yeah. So, support our Patreon.
You too can avoid having Aziz be a refugee.
Yeah. Every day, one starving Aziz is, Oof. Let's talk about the trivia answer here. Let me read the question again. Which of these characters is not in the Brotherhood Without Banners? Melly, Likely Luke, John O'Nutton, Pello, Trebla, Swampy Meg, Puddingfoot, Merritt O'Moontown. The answer is Trebla. Trebla is a member of the real Brotherhood Without Banners, the fan group. I threw her in there for fun. A couple of y'all would have recognized that because you know her and or know of her. I thought that would be fun. She sounds like she fits in there, right? But she's not fictional. Yeah, cool. So hopefully some of y'all got that. Fun thing now, Spotify has released a new feature that I always end the episodes by telling you more episodes you can listen to that relate to this. Well, now Spotify allows us to link them. So if you listen on Spotify, there should be links going forward to episodes like Thoros of Myr, The Ghost of Highheart, and Brendan Blackfish. So those should be just right there in the description.
I think Trebla's a man.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
just
whoops.
So you know.
My bad. Sorry, Trebla. I didn't mean to misgender you there. I just heard wrong or
you heard
misremembered
the
wrong.
ending name, I think, and was like...
Yeah, I might have just assumed that from the beginning.
But Trebla's a forum mod and a man.
Okay, my bad. Sorry, y'all. Honest mistake. Thanks to Stephen Atwell, racefortheironthrone.wordpress.com. And of course, Nina, goodqueenalley.tumblr.com, 1L in alley. Great takes from both of them. I haven't shouted out Stephen in a while, but man, I read his every Arya chapter review he did for A Storm of Swords, and maybe you noticed from the quality of this episode. Thanks as well to Joey Townsend for his great music that we use in our show that we've been using for many years. And to Michael Klarfeld for his maps and video intro. You can get things from the Claridox shop, download map prints, map files, and have them printed over at a Kinko's or something like that. That's what we've done. And the website is klaradox.de. That's claridox.de. Until next time, on behalf of Ashea, we will see you again very soon. And you know what to do until then. Valar Rereadus.